Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, September the 11th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day, and we hope that your week is off to a good start. We are continuing our ongoing effort to make sure every single day is a happy one for you, so that when you tune in, you can get your daily dose of happy. And it's working. I mean, the good news, Cindy, is it's really working because we're seeing it in the numbers. We're seeing more and more people tuning in to listen to the episodes, and one of the ways, there are lots of ways you can measure this kind of thing, but the way that most of the industry measures it in terms of, like if they're selling advertising or something, is in how many people listen to a particular episode and how does that work out on all the episodes on average. And that's where we've been seeing increases in a significant way for the first time since like last winter, really. We kind of reached a stagnation point during the spring and through the summer months, but we're back to rising again, and it's fun. It's fun to see that more and more people are tuning in. Now, we are doing some active promotional work, both within the podcast, encouraging people to subscribe, of course, but also outside the podcast, reaching out to, lately I've been reaching out to other podcasters, other people doing Law of Attraction podcasts, and we're going to start doing some exchanges with them to basically help each other expand our own audiences. So, there's that going on. And plus there's also just the plain put it out there into the universe and see what comes back routine. And toward that end, I got to tell you, I did something last night in my sleep that I didn't know you could do. And I say that because Abraham Hicks tells us that when we sleep, we basically are stopping our attracting, and we are stopping our resistance. Our resistance goes away while we sleep. We take it back on when we wake up, and we start focusing all the negatives again. But nevertheless, in our sleep, our resistance goes away, and we're no longer doing any attracting. So it's kind of like a timeout kind of situation. So, I always assumed, well, that must be the case. Well, last night, I found myself actively visualizing the show getting more and more popular. I mean, in my mind, I was saying to myself, I'm going to pretend that the show is getting more and more popular. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are tuning into every episode. And I started doing that. And I realized when I woke up, I did that for quite some time. I don't know how long. You know how it is when you're asleep. You don't really know how long it is. But, I mean, I didn't know you could do that.
Well, there's I've always taken a little bit of issue with the statement that you stop attracting, and that, now I do believe that you have less resistance just because your body's relaxed. And I think that a lot of the resistance we experience is physical. Or at least we feel it physically as well as, emotionally, mentally. And so it's the same with meditation, right? You get so relaxed that there's always much less resistance.
Otherwise you don't sleep, as we found out.
Right. Yes. Well, but, there's this idea that we stop attracting. It's contrary to what some other teachers say. And I know that one thing I always found interesting was the studies that show that our brain is even more active when we're asleep than when we're awake.
Very often.
It seems like, well, we go to sleep and everything just stops, but our brain actually continues to be active. And there was a book that I read years ago. I remember the author is Eric Meisel, who's written many books, but this particular book, I can't remember the title. I want to say it was I think it's called Sleep Thinking, but it's a whole system of how to program, your mind to where you can get important things done while you're asleep. And then we know stories and stories of people who have woken up with an invention or a solution to a problem that they had. I love this story of the man that invented, now I can't remember who it was, the sewing machine needle. Do you know that story?
I do not, no.
Well, the automatic sewing machine, if you look at a hand sewing needle, one end has the point and the other end has the little hole for the thread.
Right.
But on a sewing machine, the hole is on the end with the point.
Right. Yep.
And before that happened with the, automatic sewing machines that they were trying to get to work, they kept having a problem. And it was because they were creating the needles the same way with the thread at the top. And it just wasn't working right. And
Sure.
the man that was trying to invent it was really, he knew he just had it, right? It's like, I'm almost there, but I just got to figure out what to change about this. And one night he had a dream, and in the dream, there were all of these like native peoples with spears, and they were holding these spears, and at the top of the spear there was like a hole. And he woke up and he realized, that's what I need to do. The sharp end needs to have the hole. So I mean, he was attracting information and solutions while he was asleep, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, so here's my question for you, because this is great. Did you consciously make this decision and start this thinking process as you were still awake but falling asleep?
Well, that's the question, really, because part of the definition of sleep is that you're not conscious. You're asleep.
No, but I'm saying, did you go when you were still awake? Did you decide, okay, this is how I'm going to go to sleep? I'm going to start thinking. Oh, okay.
No, not at all. But
okay.
but here is the interesting part from my perspective. When I was asleep, I actually found myself in the mental process that I often am in when I am trying to be a deliberate creator, when I'm trying to focus on what it is I want to focus on and keep my mind off of what I don't want to focus on. And I found myself saying, okay, I'm feeling very relaxed now. This is a good time to try this. Let's try doing some deliberate creation. And so I'm going to deliberately focus on attracting huge numbers of new listeners to the podcast. And then I started doing the process. So I was an active participant in the dream. Now, I don't know about you. Most of my dreams where I'm doing stuff, I'm only like, I think I'd call it like a passive participant. I participate, but I'm being led by the dream. I'm not actively deciding what to do. In this case, I was actively deciding what to do. That's the part that's so different. And that's the part.
Did you recognize that it was a dream? I mean, was it a lucid dream? You realized you were dreaming?
I think I recognized that I was asleep. I knew that much. Did I think of it as a dream? I don't think so. I don't think I thought of it as a dream. But I definitely knew that I was asleep. So, I don't know. Is that a dream?
That's so interesting. Well, I mean, that's why I think one of the reasons, and there's scores of things written on lucid dreaming, but when you're lucid in a dream, suddenly you know that you're dreaming, but within that knowledge is also the sense that you can control everything.
Which is unusual. That's not, for me anyway, that's an unusual sensation. That is not my normal behavior pattern in dreaming states.
Some people, I've heard people say before that when they were younger, like kids, like teenagers or younger children, that most of their dreams were lucid.
Really?
Now, that's not the case with me. I mean, I had to really focus and read books and, take action to create it. And for a while, I was having a lucid dream probably once a week or so. But I mean, I really had to use a process to get there. It didn't just happen naturally. But I remember the first time it happened, it was really funny. I started having this dream that I was kind of in the trenches, and there was like a war going on all around me.
Ooh, yeah.
And I had a telephone in my hand, and in my dream, it wasn't, here in the States, the number is 911 to call for an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And in my dream, it was something else. It was like 511 or something, but I couldn't dial it. It just wasn't working. And then all of a sudden, it hit me that I was dreaming. And when I realized I was dreaming, I was like, none of this can hurt me. This is awesome. And I just stood up out of the little foxhole thing. I was like, okay. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but I remember I was just infused with bravery and courage all of a sudden because, I realized I was indestructible because this is just a dream. And then, of course, flying dreams and things like that. But one thing you will hear, because people use lucid dreaming to consciously create. I mean, this is a thing that people do. And when you talk to people who are, actively doing this, a lot of them will tell you that, and I will agree, that a lucid dream, which I've really only probably had less than a dozen in my whole life, but they feel more real than what real life feels like.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I know that sounds, but it's true. I mean, I think that's why for a little while I stopped lucid dreaming, because I was like a little bit afraid of it because it seemed so powerful.
Okay.
So you're tapping into something that's really powerful. I would keep going.
Well, that's just the thing. There was no prep for this. I mean, this was not something I intended to do. I was not planning to be a lucid dreamer at all. I was not planning to do anything like this. I have done things in the middle of the night, like you and I were talking about lack of sleep the last couple of days because we've been experiencing it, you more than me. And I know there have been times where I've been, awake in the middle of the night and I've tried to do processes because I figured, well, I'm awake. I might as well do something, right?
Right, exactly. Me too.
So I've done that, but I can't ever recall doing any deliberate creating or lucid dreaming or whatever that was about doing deliberate creation. This is the first time I've ever experienced that. And I mean, when you say, well, lots of people do that, I'm saying, well, geez, boy, am I behind the times. I'm apparently the only one who's not doing it. But
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying it is a thing. I mean, there are books about it. I mean, it's out there. Would I say that most conscious creators are doing it? No, I mean, not consciously, maybe. I think it's a great thing to learn, and I'm kind of like getting that itch to start doing it again. But what I think is really awesome, I think the awesome thing is that it just sort of came to you.
exactly.
We were talking last week about when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Right?
That's right. We did, didn't we?
Yeah. And I think that's how, a lot of times it's like, okay, you're ready for it.
It's a bit of a surprise when it comes, though, especially when you're not really, expecting something to come that way. Because I mean, that was the last thing I was expecting to have happen. I normally don't even remember my dreams. First of all, I'm one of those people who very rarely remembers dreams, and when I do remember, it's an occasion. So this is definitely an occasion because I remembered them, but even more specifically, it was an occasion because I was a deliberate participant in them. I mean, even the time many years ago, actually I know when it was in April 2008. My father had passed in March 2008, and I had a dream in late April that we had reconnected. We had this long conversation. I hugged him. It was all very visceral. It was a great experience. But even so, I don't really remember myself deliberately taking steps in a significant way in that dream. I remember certain things that I did, like I saw my father, and I was overwhelmed, and so I came up to him and hugged him and so forth. But most of the dream, even that particular dream, I was being led through. It was not like I was the one directing it. And
right.
that's what makes the lucid dreaming part so interesting, because I was directing it. I was directing every step along the way. In fact, I was doing something. This is really interesting. Yesterday, we had an interview with a woman named Julie Ryan, who's really fascinating. She calls herself a medical intuitive, which was a phrase I'd never heard. But basically, she helps heal people intuitively, psychically.
Right.
And it was a great conversation. One of the things that we were, one of the things that we were talking about was how, oh geez, I just lost the thought. Oh dear. Where was I going with that?
This is the woman that does the LOA radio?
Yes, she's on the Law of Attraction radio network. Right. She's one of their stars, so to speak. And let's see, what were we talking about regarding dreaming, though? Well, you just point. What was help me tie it together, because stuff fell apart in my mind. You just made a point. What was the point you just made?
Well, we were just talking about. You were talking about directing the dream,
right?
And having control over it and being an active participant in the dream instead of just the dream leading you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you said something about what we did last week.
That when the student is ready, the teacher
when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That was a phrase that we used yesterday. We didn't quite use that exact phrase, but it was a message. It was a meaning that we used in yesterday's conversation. And the way we tie it together yesterday was a little bit different, but it was a case of, I guess I was ready. I just didn't know I was ready.
Right.
And in the course of being ready, I found myself doing something unexpected. And that it was the thing of doing unexpected that was, well, unexpected. It was just a surprise. It was an amazing surprise. And here I am actively participating. I was directing the dream. I was deciding to focus on doing, attracting more listeners to the show. I was deciding how I was going to do it. I was deciding to do it by focusing on, well, let's pretend. I'm going to use the pretend method, like I'm a 6-year-old, right? Another thing we talked about in yesterday's show. I'm going to pretend that the show is successful. I'm going to act as if it were true in my mind, and I started doing that. I mean, it was literally step by step thinking like you would do consciously when you're doing deliberate creation in your conscious mode, and I'm doing it in my sleep. That's the part that's blowing me away. I was in control every step of the way.
I would encourage you to write it down.
Okay.
Because what it sounds like, I have this experience once in a while where I will wake up. Actually, I have this experience pretty often where I will wake up and realize that I've just been dreaming that I've been giving a speech or that I've been teaching a class. And sometimes the things that are in those speeches or classes are like news to me, and I'll be like, oh, hey, that's pretty good. And sometimes it turns into an essay that gets published, or it turns into something that I use in my teaching. So about when my kids were younger, at some point I homeschooled them, and so we no longer at that point had the get up and have to be out of the house by 7 a.m. kind of thing. And so I stopped waking up to an alarm. And I got really interested in dreaming and in how dreams work at that point. Well, I had been already, and I'd been reading books, and now was my chance that I got to wake up without an alarm. And so I started to keep a dream journal. And I'm bringing this up because you had said you're someone that doesn't often remember dreams.
Right.
I didn't either. And so I thought, I was reading all these books on dreams. I really wanted to get where I was a master at like being able to take a dream apart and understand what my subconscious was trying to say to me. And so I decided to keep a dream journal, and I would write in the journal, even if I didn't remember, I would write no recall. I would write the date and write no recall. Or sometimes I would remember just something that was almost not even like a movie. It was more like a snapshot, like a picture, just one tiny thing. I would write a fragment and just write what I just remembered. It might be nothing, a color or a person. I remember this person in my dream, but I don't remember anything about it. But every day I would write something, even if it was just no recall, no recall, no recall, because what I was doing was training myself to know.
Right.
That I'm going to write it down. So I might as well have a dream, because I'm not going to get out of writing it down just because I didn't have a dream. And so suddenly I started remembering dreams, and it got to the point where I would have 5, 6, 7 very vivid dreams in a night, and I would just pick one. It was like there was so much to write down. I would just decide. I said, if I write all of these down, I'll be here for 2 hours. So I'm just going to pick one that seems significant. And that's the most I ever had dream recall, is when I kept a dream journal for about 4 years. And that was the most I ever recalled my dreams. But boy, it was fascinating. And back then I didn't know about conscious creating. I mean, I think I was learning it, but not like I know it now. And so I keep thinking, as I hear you talk about this, combining the two. Yeah, I want to go back and do this.
You're thinking you're going to try it again and actually do it from a deliberate creation point of view.
Well, I think I do it pretty often, kind of like you did it. In other words, without any planning or processing on my part. But I kind of like the idea of going back to the whole processes of planning to have a lucid dream. Like, for instance, one of the things, I'll tell you 2 things about lucid dreaming that will help. One of them is a reality check, because like I said, lucid dreams are often so real that it's like, this is a way, and you want to know you're in a dream because then you can direct it, right? Then you can make it happen. Then you can decide, I'm in my dream and I'm on the podcast and I'm going to have, 20 people try to call in this week, and I'm going to experience. I can write the script. I can have whatever happened that I want to happen. I'm going to watch these numbers go way up. I'm going to, hear from people how it's helping them, whatever. So you want to know you're in the dream. That's what makes it lucid, is that, oh, I'm in a dream. I can do what I want. So one way that people do that is they start paying attention to what time it is in their waking life. Look at the clock. And when you see a clock, look away and then look at it again. So I just looked at my clock. It says I'm on Central Time, so it says 7:21. So it's 8:21 Eastern. I look away. I look back. Yeah, it's still 8:21 Eastern. But in a dream, that will never happen in a dream. You look at your watch in a dream, and it'll be noon, and then you look away and you look at your watch again. And it's 4 o'clock, or it's some weird. It's gone backwards or something. So it's called a reality check, and it's a way that you can know I'm in a dream, and now I can start directing this dream however I want to. So I think that that's like a really cool thing to do, but you have to do it. The other thing is, if you're in a lucid dream and all of a sudden you feel yourself, oh no, I'm waking up. Because most of the time, if you're in a lucid dream, you're having so much fun, you don't really want to wake up.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm losing it. Oh no, I'm waking up. Spin around. Just spin around. Usually that will keep you in the dream.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You sound a little skeptical.
I don't know what to make of it, to be perfectly honest. I mean, literally, I guess you're going farther with the dream than I had even experienced last night. To me, I wasn't being as specific as, well, I'm going to have this many people listen to the dream, and so now I'm experiencing this many people listening to the dream. It wasn't like that at all. I was simply doing what I do in my waking state, just visualizing, well, wouldn't it be great to have, people in the listen, so many people tuning in. And often my stories don't go very far, and they didn't go very far in the dream. It felt just like I was doing it in my waking state.
Well, I think that's what's so cool, is that you found yourself doing in your dreaming state the conscious creation techniques that you use in your waking state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does that tell you? It's like it's becoming natural, so natural you do it in your sleep. And we have that saying, right? Oh, he could do that in his sleep, right?
That's true.
Walt is such an amazing conscious creator. He just does it in his sleep.
The other thing too is I don't think I've ever felt like my sleep, my dream was the same as reality. Maybe I have.
Did you last night?
No. It was very clear to me I was in a dream.
Okay.
I didn't have to do a reality check. It wasn't even a question. It was like, oh yeah, I'm dreaming. I know that. That's okay.
I had a dream a week or so ago. I might have said this on the podcast. It was so funny. I had have you ever had a dream inside of a dream?
I don't know what that means. Okay,
what it means is you're dreaming and you wake up and you're like maybe telling someone about the dream you just had, but you're actually still dreaming. And then you really wake up. And you're like,
I think I had that when I was a kid one time, but yeah, that's been a long time ago.
The other week I had like a dream inside of a dream, inside of a dream, inside of a dream. I kept waking up in my dream and telling someone about the dream I just had, and then waking up again, but I still wasn't really awake in real life. And at one point in my dream, I pinched myself. Because you know how they always say, pinch me to see if I'm dreaming. I pinched myself to see if I was dreaming, and I pinched myself really hard in the dream. I was like, ow, that hurt. I must not be dreaming. I must be awake, but I still really was dreaming. And then I woke up and I was like, oh, wow, I don't even know how to explain this.
Well, let me pose another question for you. How do you know you're awake?
Maybe I'm not.
I mean, right now we're doing this podcast, or so we think.
Well, so we think. But I know I'm awake because it's 8:24 Eastern time, and I looked away. When I look back, it's still 8:24.
It's still 8:24, so the reality check worked. Okay.
But then again, I pinched myself, and it wasn't really happening. So, yeah. But the clock always works, or at least it has for me so far. So, speaking of the clock, let's tell everybody how they can subscribe, because I don't think we've done that yet.
We have not. You're right. Yes, when we always make it a point to do that at some point during the show. So, yeah, actually, 3 messages we need to give out. The first one is, if you are a non-subscriber, perhaps this is your first episode, and you're finding it to be entertaining. First of all, we're glad of that. Second of all, you are in line with a whole bunch of other people who have discovered us lately, who are helping to increase our numbers because they're finding they were enjoying it too. So here's the good news. You can become a subscriber and get all of the episodes that we do. We do 11 a week coming right to your smartphone every single day, or tablet, or whatever device you use. And it's real simple to do. If you have never subscribed before, very, very simple. The instructions are on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net. And basically, like if you're on an iPhone, you don't even have to go to the homepage. You can just go right to your podcast software. That's the cool thing about an iPhone. It has podcast app built right in. You open it up and there's a little search icon, little magnifier glass, and click that and do a search on LOA Today, and boom, there we are. And then you click the subscribe button, and now you got all of our episodes coming directly to your phone. Android users are not left out in the cold, of course. They also can subscribe, and we love them when they do so. The only real difference is podcast operating systems don't normally come with, Android operating systems do not normally come with podcast apps built in, so you have to go find one in the Play Store. But fortunately, there are a lot of them, and many of them are free. But you just find one, install it, and then do a search within that, just like the iPhone users do, and you can find LOA Today, and boom, now you can subscribe too. And even tablet users can do it too, whether you have an iPad or an Android type tablet, it works just the same there as well. But please do become a subscriber, because we make it a point every single episode to have so much fun that the fun is contagious and you're feeling like you're a part of it. And that's really the beauty of being a subscriber, because it's a way of getting that lift every single day. So give yourself the lift, because we know we're all deliberate creators, right? We're all followers of the law of attraction. We know how important it is to get to that high-flying place. Well, LOA Today is a great way to make sure you're doing it twice a day, which is really cool. Second message. For those of you who are already subscribers, please keep posting out there. Many of you are doing it now, and we want everyone to do it. Just post on your social media platform of choice, whatever you use, something about loatoday.net. And when you do that, you're helping not only through the algorithms of social media, but also through the source energy of the law of attraction. You are putting out there, hey, Law of Attraction through teaching through loatoday.net, teaching, and not just teaching, entertainment is great stuff. And other people find out about it. And then they also become subscribers. So you're helping to spread the word so that more and more people can get their daily dose of happy. So those are the 2 big messages. There's also a third one, which is we love to hear from you guys. We've had that a couple times this week, Cindy. We had a caller come in on Monday morning. And that caller, by the way, his name is Louis. He lives in London. And after the call was done, Tom Wells, who was doing the podcast with me, said, I've been thinking about reducing down from 2 to 1 podcast a week. He'd be a great person to be the co-host. Well, not coincidentally, Louis had actually originally contacted me by email saying, hey, I'd love to be a co-host. The Law of Attraction has done its thing again. And so Louis is going to be the new Monday morning co-host on LOA Today. Amazing. Which is very cool. So you never know what's going to happen when you call in as a listener. We also had, of course, Julie Ryan, who was our guest yesterday, and we had one of our listeners chatting questions to us through the Zoom chat. So that was fun too. But it's great when you contact us either by calling the show or just by using the contact form on the loatoday.net website, or however you choose to contact us through social media, Facebook. You can tweet something at us. Although, to be perfectly honest, if you want me to see it, don't tweet it to me, because I don't look at Twitter. But nevertheless, I look at Facebook. That's a good way to do it. We now have an Instagram person. We have somebody who's actually posting stuff for us on Instagram. So there are a number of ways you can get in touch with us. But please get in touch with us, because we love it. We love it when we hear from our listeners. I think one of the first ways
anybody ever contacted me about the podcast was Instagram.
Really?
Well, besides email. I mean, I have had people send me an email, but I had made a comment on someone else's Instagram thread, had nothing to do with law of attraction. I just had made a comment, and then someone commented to my comment and said, love your podcast with Walt. You guys are doing a great job. And I was
cool.
like, wow, how cool. So you won't find Walt maybe on Twitter, but you can find me over there. So
There you go. Yeah.
if you're a tweeter, you can tweet to me or find me on Instagram. Those are the two places that I'm most likely to see it.
That's good. Yeah.
We're all over the place.
My best place to be found is Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media, but that's your best shot. If you want to catch me on social media, that's the best place to try to get me.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Yay. Yeah, it's great.
Now, when we were figuring out what we wanted to do with today's episode, we wanted to continue our series that you and I have started about looking at people who are wealthy, but who have also made significant contributions to the human race. And we've done quite a few lately so far. We've done a piece on Joe Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. We did an episode on Ralph Lauren, the fashion icon. We did one on, let's see, who else have we done? We talked about Betty White, Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, we talked about Oprah Winfrey. So we've done a few of them so far. And
Mr. Rogers.
And Mr. Rogers. Oh, Fred Rogers. Favorite. That's right. Yes. Fred Rogers. He was great too. But we're kind of figuring out, okay, who do we want to do next? And then you came up with Emma Watson, which I thought was a great choice, particularly since we did Joe Rowling. But
you know that question that people ask, they're like, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive,
right, yeah,
right, and I always just draw a blank most of the time. Of course, one of my answers to that question was always Florence Scovel Shinn.
Oh yeah,
we've talked about her before on the podcast. The author of the very famous New Thought book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. But when we started this series because we had just finished up the book Money and the Law of Attraction. And what we realized is there was continually all through it direction to write a new money story. And so often people's money story, the old money story, the money story that's not doing us any good, is a very judgmental money story. And it might have a lot of things in it like, I never get paid enough. And, and it also may have things in it that point out that rich people, act ways that we don't like, and people are bad, and wealth is evil, and all of this kind of thing. And we realized, well,
that doesn't serve us very much.
And oftentimes the stories that we hear, the things we see in the news, and the billionaires that get a lot of airtime in the news are people who maybe we don't want to behave like, and we wouldn't want to hang out with. And it hit us both that that's really not the majority of people with loads of wealth.
Not at all.
Because it's not the majority of people.
Not even close.
And so we just had this idea that, well, what if we were to get to know some people that were extremely wealthy, and also people we would want to have dinner with, people that are doing good things in the world, people that have fun personalities, people that are kind. Mr. Rogers, I loved the one quote we used of him that he said that there are three things that you have to do to be successful. Number one, always be kind. Number two, always be kind. Number three, always be kind. And I thought, so we started thinking about it yesterday about today's show. And I've always just liked Emma Watson. And Emma Watson, of course, is famous for her role as Hermione in Harry Potter. And so I thought, well, let's just find out a little bit about Emma.
Yeah.
Emma earned $60 million in the Harry Potter series. And I'm not sure, she's been in lots of other movies and done lots of other things. And so that's
clearly where that's where she made her big money, though, no doubt about it, in the Harry Potter series. I mean, I think they said the first Harry Potter film came out and it grossed $940 million. It's like, holy cow!
Seriously,
you've got
wow,
$940 million. Can you imagine nearly $1 billion for a film on its release? Oh my goodness!
Wow,
that's just mind blowing.
I read something interesting when I was taking a very quick look at her biography. And that was that after there were how many movies?
8 movies.
8. Okay, that's what I thought. And which one was the Phoenix? Was that 6?
That was 5.
5.
Right.
Okay. So after that movie, all 3 stars were hesitant to sign on for the next 2.
Hmm.
And and in the article that I read, it didn't really say why, but well, it did from her point of view, because I think she finally agreed to after Daniel Radcliffe agreed to.
Oh, really?
She was, she held out a little longer. And part of it was that, well, I mean, altogether it was 10 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And they all started as kids. I
Right.
mean, young kids. And she just didn't know if she knew that saying yes was 4 more years of commitment.
Right.
And it seemed like a lot. And I was like, well, it does seem like a lot. And especially it would seem like a lot to an adult, let alone to a kid.
Yeah, teenager. Oh, yeah. 4 years seems like a long time. I remember when it was, my time to go to college. College is 4 years, right? And that just seemed like an eternity. Of course, when you're done with it, it's like, whoa, where did it go? But in the beginning, it seems like a long time.
I often think of how fast the weeks go by now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Now that I'm more advanced in my age, now that I'm not 10, right? But when I was a kid, when it was like you had to wait until the weekend for something and it was Tuesday, it
Yes,
just
right.
felt like it was never going to come. And now it's like, oh, the weekend's just boom, boom, boom. So yeah, so she wasn't sure that she wanted to commit, but then I thought it was funny. She said she realized she could never hand off the role of Hermione to someone else.
Yeah, sure.
I thought, oh, I guess not. I mean, be very attached to it.
Well, plus it's also a pretty big thing, I think, among actors. They like working with certain actors. Like, for instance, a very famous friendship is between two British actors, Maggie Smith and Judi Dench, and they're very very close. They haven't worked together a lot in the same films, but they have at times. And there was one film I'm trying to remember which film it was. I think it may have been Ladies in Lavender, but there was the producer was trying to convince them to come on board, and I guess he or she had talked with Judi Dench first, and then went to talk with Maggie, and Maggie said they knew, of course, that both of them were being lured onto the show, trying to get them both to sign on. And Maggie asked, "Well, did you say yes?" And the producer says, "Yes, she did." And she says, "Oh, okay, well then I'll do it." Not because of the money, not because of the role, but because her friend Judi Dench was going to be on the film.
I love it. I love it. I love them both too.
Oh, they're terrific. They're absolutely terrific. I love. You don't get it very often, but I love it when they do scenes together. I remember the scene toward the end of the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. The two characters really hadn't interacted much at all, and they're near the end of the movie, and they greet each other. And I think Maggie Smith's character says, "We haven't talked much, you and I," which is kind of like a direct reflection of the fact that they haven't talked during the film as friends, right?
That's funny.
And you just watch their interaction. Of course, they're two brilliant actors, and the two of them are just holding their roles perfectly. But you can also see the sparkle in their eyes because you could tell they're loving doing that scene together.
Oh, that's so great. Well, yeah, and I can only imagine that the cast of Harry Potter felt like that about each other.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about Emma, Rupert, and Daniel is they all describe themselves as three extremely different people. Not the kind of people who would normally be good friends or something like that. But because they went through the experience together, they're very good friends because they're the only three people in the world who know what it's like.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't just, one movie. It was 10 years of movies.
That's right.
So
8 movies, yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that, having, and Emma Watson went to she graduated with a degree in literature from Brown.
From Brown University, yeah.
And I believe she also went to Oxford. So she continued her education and got her degree and has continued acting.
Mm-hmm.
She's done a lot of things, actually, especially for someone so young.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But I thought what was interesting is her ideas, because of her part. I see it in her part, and I guess everyone would, but she said that she works for a lot of feminist causes and women's rights work, and she promotes education for girls. And there was one quote, I was trying to find it. It's so funny. It was where she's talking about why she started looking into this and the idea of feminism. And it was that when she was really young, of course, I had the quote in front of me and now I've lost it.
Oh,
I think she was 14 or 10.
yeah, that's pretty
She
young.
said she said that she was described as bossy. And I thought that was funny because
That's her
she
character.
had that little character, right?
Yeah.
But she was described as bossy, but her male friends or other boys that she knew were not.
Mm-hmm.
For the same types of being outspoken. And then she noticed that her when she was 18, that her friends, her male friends, she noticed that they really had trouble showing their emotions, whereas the women that she knew didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. It was a speech
Okay.
that she gave. It says Watson has promoted education for girls visiting Bangladesh and Zambia to do so. And in July of 2014, she was appointed as a UN Women Goodwill Ambassador. In September, an admittedly nervous Watson delivered an address at UN headquarters in New York City.
Wow.
It was kind of funny, right? Because she's acted forever, but this was like nerve-wracking. I can imagine.
Well, yeah, because it's live. It's
address.
when you're doing movies, you're acting for the camera and for your fellow
That's right.
crew members.
You can redo and retake.
Yeah.
So it says to launch the UN Women campaign, He for She, which calls for men to advocate for gender equality. In that speech, she said she began questioning gender-based assumptions at age 8. Okay, I knew she was young. At age 8, when she was called bossy, a trait that she has attributed to her being a perfectionist, whilst boys were not. And at 14, when she was sexualized by certain elements of the media. Watson's speech also called feminism the belief that men and women should have equal rights and equal opportunities, and declared that the perception of man-hating is something that has to stop. And so I thought it was interesting that she made this choice to delve more into these ideas because of things that she experienced when she was 8.
And not only did she start that young, which is phenomenal. I mean, that she started so young, but more than that, and this is very common, not just in feminism, but in almost any kind of political movement you can name. It's really common for a movement to be hardest on its own people. That pattern, I don't think I've ever seen an exception to it. And I'm a student of politics. I was a political science major in college, so I've spent a lot of time noticing this stuff and watching it. And it's just incredible how people within a particular movement will be brutal to their own followers. Absolutely brutal to them. And she experienced the same thing. I mean, she has gotten some really, really bad pushback, really unfair pushback, in my view, from the feminist movement, which I think is just incredible. But nevertheless, it's part of the pattern.
Yeah, when she gave that UN speech, within 12 hours, she started receiving threats.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and she said, if they were trying to put me off women's rights work, it did the opposite. But something that she's done that I thought was really cool, and it actually, I didn't know a lot about Emma Watson besides just being a fan of her, acting. But I think it was a couple of years ago now, somehow I got an invitation. She started a feminist book club with Goodreads.
I heard about that.
Mm-hmm. And it's like got a lot of members, and it's called Our Shared Shelf. And the goal of it is just to share feminist ideas and encourage discussion. They read, I think, one book a month, and then they do a discussion.
How interesting, too, that she's picked books as the media of choice, considering that Harry Potter started as books.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that. And she's got a degree in literature.
Right. Yeah.
And I wonder if that's connected.
I'm sure it is.
Sure, it's all connected
because
that's, everything we do ends up affecting something else that we're doing. But I just think it's wonderful that she, let me find this quote because it's really nice. A quote from Emma Watson. Let's see. Okay. She said, I'm willing to be seen. I'm willing to speak up. I'm willing to keep going. I'm willing to listen to what others have to say. I'm willing to go forward even when I feel alone. I'm willing to go to bed each night at peace with myself. I'm willing to be my biggest, bestest, most powerful self.
Hmm. Wow.
And, one of the things I thought was so interesting is that idea, almost every quote that I've read from her has to do with really being who she is and not being afraid to be who she is. Like this quote, don't feel stupid if you don't like what everyone else pretends to love.
Hmm.
It's she says, I give 100%. I can't do it any other way. And I don't want people to decide what I am. I want to decide for myself. And so, like you said, she's gotten a lot of pushback.
Oh, yeah.
And it's okay. Right. It's like she's
And
going
good for
to be
her.
who she is, regardless of how she gets responded to. Another quote, what gets scary is when your self-worth is tied up in what strangers think of you.
Oh, yeah. I agree with that.
She says, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to be who I really am. I'm going to figure out what that is. She also has a certification in yoga teaching. She has a certification in meditation. She has a degree in literature, and she's doing all of this work. And it's very obvious to me that she has not let other people decide
Right?
what she's going to do or who she is. And so I think that's something that we can all, really take away, because as far as conscious creation goes, that's when we really become masterful at creating consciously, is when we're willing to be who we are.
Yeah.
Because inspiration's always going to be attached to us being authentic.
And I don't know Rupert Grint's story as well. I know Daniel Radcliffe's story fairly well. And I know that the people behind the scenes during the filming of all the Harry Potter films were very protective and very supportive of the three young kids, as well as the other kids who were involved in secondary roles in the various movies. But the thing that impresses me particularly about Emma and Daniel is how well balanced they have become as adults. They're very balanced human beings. I haven't heard much about Rupert, so I don't know exactly where he's at. I imagine he's probably in a similar place, but I just don't know. But Emma and Daniel in particular have demonstrated almost wisdom beyond their years in their ability to stay in balance, focused, not thinking too much of themselves, not thinking too little of themselves, not getting wrapped up in, bad side adventures because they're not feeling good about themselves or whatever. They've really grown into remarkable human beings.
Yeah, there was one quote that I wasn't sure, I didn't read it in the context of the article, so I'm not sure where the quote was pointing, right? I don't know what question was asked of her to produce this answer, but I still loved it. She said, I had a job when I was 10.
Yes, right.
I started living on my own when I was 17 or 18. I've earned my own money. I've traveled the world. What would I rebel against?
That's true. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen, but it's still true.
And I thought, I'm really curious to what the question was.
Yeah, right.
About her rebelling. It's like, what would I rebel against? Possibly I'm thinking of that idea that teenagers are rebellious.
Well, I've had lots of conversations. Louise and I have talked about that a lot, about where does rebelliousness come from, and where
comes from the
and where does
nature to be autonomous.
Well, also where also does sibling rivalry come from? Because both of us are convinced that while everyone needs to become autonomous, it is not ingrained to have rivalries. It is not ingrained to be rebellious. That's not part of the growing up process necessarily. It has become that in most Western societies, and I suspect in Eastern societies as well. But that doesn't mean that's part of the nature of becoming a teenager and then a young adult and then an adult. It's the nature of becoming an adult within those societies. I'm convinced of that. It has nothing to do with, I mean, the part that is true to the human being who's growing up is they want to be autonomous. They want to do things their way. They want to live their own way. They want to follow their own dreams. That is normal. That's natural. It's the rebellion part that isn't necessary to it. The only reason it's necessary is because
framed as rebellion.
Well, it does get framed as rebellion, and it gets treated as rebellion.
Trying to be autonomous, right?
Yeah. And
sometimes the only way within a family structure, when we have pretty much no control over anything, you know, as an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, I mean, everyone is making the rules for us. Everyone is setting the standards and expectations for us. And a lot of things are the same, right? And in a family, we go the same places, do the same things, eat the same meals, watch the same programs, whatever it is that we do. A lot of the times it's the same. That the only way we can be autonomous is to try to do something different.
It's true.
Is to decide we want to eat a certain way or dress a certain way, and often that gets framed as rebellion.
Yeah.
And the tighter those constraints are to do it our way, the more it looks like rebellion when we try to break out of that little pattern and do something our own way. So I think that, and as far as rivalry goes, I don't know. I think that it's ingrained in us to survive, right? I mean, that's that squirrel brain again that is so important to us to get away from the dog that's chasing us, find a nut to eat, and find other squirrel that we can procreate with to make more squirrels, because those are the only 3 things that are important at that primal level of survival. We just have to survive. So it's built into us to make sure that we continue living. And I don't know, I think sometimes that shows up in different ways when it's not an issue.
Well,
living isn't, you know.
It doesn't have to be an issue, but it does become one. I think there's another aspect to sibling rivalry. And I think what it comes down to is something directly tied into what we talk about in law of attraction circles and deliberate creation. And that is source energy, being connected to energy, being in alignment. I think it was James Redfield who wrote the Celestine Prophecy series of books, pointed out that there is a lot of energy and effort expended in trying to take energy from others, and that it's as if there was a shortage of energy. And you know, some people will strive against other people because they're looking for energy and they don't know how to get it otherwise. One of the great things about learning about deliberate creation is learning that the energy actually comes from within, which again was also a Redfield point. But the fact that it comes from within means that we don't have to try to steal energy from somebody else in order to feel energized. We can actually learn to connect within and get it that way. And that's really the healthiest way to get it, because that's an unending flow. It never stops. But in a sibling rivalry, I think what happens is kids aren't really taught to go within very often. And instead, they're taught through their circumstances to compete with each other for the attention of the parents. If you get enough kids involved in a family, there's only so much parent to go around.
Right, exactly.
You know? So eventually you get to the point where the rivalry becomes pretty intense, because in their experience, in their knowledge, the only way they know to re-energize themselves is to fight for the parental attention.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's true about the energy. You know, I know I used to take a yoga class from a specific teacher, and one of the things that she would do at the beginning of the class that I still remind myself to do now is she would have everyone be very quiet and still and just relax, and then she would say, now just bring all of your energy back into yourself, all of the energy that's been reaching out and doing things for other people and, you know, concern for other people and taking care of all these little chores and things that just bring it all back into your center. And I always thought that was a really interesting exercise, because it's just a thought exercise, right?
Yeah.
But it really does seem to have an effect.
I think so.
And yeah. And so often, you know, you were talking about other people taking your energy or taking energy from others, but a lot of times we're giving that energy as well.
Oh,
right?
yeah. It works both ways. Sure.
It's taking from me. It's that I'm just giving.
Mm-hmm.
And now I need to bring that all back, and I need to, ground myself and be able to take care of my own thoughts and my own needs.
That's why I think it's very important for parents to make a point of teaching their kids how they can go inside. They can go within to connect to everything that is. And I mean, that's part of what I hope happens with people who learn to become deliberate creators, who learn about the law of attraction. I hope that when, for those who have kids, I hope they're teaching their kids that. I know some people do. I know you've talked about how you did with your kids. My new co-host on Monday, he's doing it with his young daughter. She's only like 2 or 3 years old, something like that. And already she's becoming a complete deliberate creator, which is really cool. I love that. But
I read an article about a school where instead of like timeouts and detention, they have meditation.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
And it's not seen as a punishment. I mean, it's just a different system altogether, mm-hmm. where they recognize. And I thought, wow, just think about it from the time, if from the time you were 5 or 6, you knew that when you started feeling something uncomfortable, instead of acting out, you knew meditation was the thing that was going to smooth everything out and make everything okay.
Yeah, it's a good tool to have. That's for sure.
I thought, wow.
And I say that as someone who doesn't meditate much, or at least didn't think he meditated much. I can't remember if it was you or one of the other co-hosts who pointed out to me that I've actually been a meditator and didn't know it.
Yes.
Because I do what they call walking meditation.
Yoga too.
Yeah, exactly. Accidental yoga. Yeah. Lie down on the floor. Oh, it's a yoga pose? Really? But yeah, I mean, finding out that I was actually doing meditation was quite the eye-opener. And it also expands the definition of it a lot. Once you expand the definition, you begin to realize meditation is almost whatever you make it. It really just comes down to one thing. Is it helping to calm your mind? If it is, it's meditation.
I think it's, a fantastic thing to teach it to kids at an early age so that they can, I mean, it's part of the process for me of conscious creating. So
it is.
That's what I started teaching my kids that when they were young teenagers. I wish I would have, known more to teach them when they were as young as 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see now that they're adults that it had an impact and that they're, very good at it. they're good at consciously creating what they want. So,
which is good. And I have to say, I also now know today that it can actually lead to the point where you end up doing lucid dreaming creation. I didn't know I could do that. Well, apparently that's the next step in my journey, is learning that particular skill level, so to speak. So apparently it shows up and starts emerging from my pores in various ways I had not anticipated.
Well, I'm happy we didn't delve too deep, but if we can take anything away from our discussion of Emma Watson, this young woman who is doing good things in the world and has been so powerful with everything she's done. Her acting is so memorable. No one will ever forget her as Hermione.
Oh, she was brilliant as Hermione. Oh.
But just the idea that, she says that I don't want other people to decide who I am. I want to decide that for myself. If we could all remember that, we get to decide for ourselves who we are and who we're becoming. That will make all of us more powerful in our creative endeavors.
That's a very strong, admirable young woman. And just another example of how someone with money can be a really remarkable person that we can admire and love and just feel so good about. So, well, thank you for picking her as a topic, because I mean she's a great example of it. I mean, she's right in there with Fred Rogers, because with some of the earlier ones we were talking about their philanthropy and so forth. With Emma and Fred, their philanthropy was just being who they were and relating to other people the way they were. That's their philanthropy. And it's far better than the monetary kind, I think.
And I'm sure there's enough of that as well.
Oh, there's plenty of it. Sure. Yeah, it's just not what you hear about the most.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to carrying on the conversation later tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, we're going to have to wrap it up. So it's been a pleasure, Cindie.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. I will be back tomorrow morning, and you will be back this afternoon. So.
I will indeed. And we hope that you join us next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.